To begin with this morning, a confession for you from your minister, and it is that I don't always see clearly as I would like to see. Although I went for my biennial eye test to the opticians recently, and was pleased to learn that my eyesight hasn't changed since my last visit in 2022. Are you impressed? I thought you might be. I still need to wear glasses for computer and close-up work and for reading, but my long sight vision is fine, which is strange actually, because when I first started to wear glasses, I needed them for long-distance vision. I can remember getting my first pair of specs and putting them on and suddenly becoming aware that everything was so clear, everything was so crisp, and the clarity of things, it was as if my eyes had been unveiled and I could now see things clearly. And it was quite a revelation, I don't mind telling you that. The season that we are currently in the church calendar and in our lectionary readings is called Epiphany. That's what we've been thinking about for this past few weeks. And it's all about revelation and seeing things clearly. And in our gospel reading this morning, we have another example of the revelation of who Jesus is. The account of the wedding at Cana and Jesus turning water into wine is one of the most familiar stories in the Bible, and it's an important marker at the beginning of John's Gospel, helping his readers to sit up and to take notice of Jesus' identity and his mission. Looking back on my sermons, I've preached on this passage a number of times and focus on various things, such as the significance of the stone water jars, the practice of ritual washing and cleanliness laws, the nature and character of weddings in the time of Jesus, the role of Jesus' mother in the story, and then also the interaction between Jesus and his mother, and the interaction between Jesus and the other characters in the story, and also the significance of the abundance and quality of wine. You might think there's nothing else to think about and preach on, but there is, because we are going to stand back this morning and focus on the key to understanding this important passage, the importance of this passage. We're going to step back and we're going to take in the panoramic view that John's Gospel presents. And the key is found into understanding this account. The key is found in the last verse. If you still have your Bibles open with you there, where we read that John declares this to be the first of the signs the miraculous signs that Jesus performed. And then goes on to say that through this sign, Jesus revealed his glory and the disciples put their faith in him. Jesus revealed his glory and the disciples put their faith in him. Now, glory is a major theme in John's Gospel, and it connects not only the signs and the miracles of Jesus' ministry, beginning with this sign here, this turning water into wine at the wedding in Cana, but it also connects, there's a connection between the beginning of Jesus' life, the incarnation, and the end of Jesus' life, the cross. So at the beginning of John's Gospel, we read those famous and soaring words of the prologue, which include this: "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Right at the beginning of the Gospel, John is indicating that he and those around him, possibly his community, the we that is described there, we have seen his glory. In other words, they have been witness to the presence of God displayed in Jesus Christ. not in some spiritual or mystical way, but in the physical, tangible events and the evidence which John will produce and document in his gospel. It's like he's giving his readers a bit of a heads up to say to them, to say to us, keep an eye out for these clues as to who Jesus is, which I'm going to drop in from time to time to keep your attention, to keep his readers' attention. So right at the beginning, John tells us to look for the glory of God in Jesus Christ. He also indicates in the lead up to the events of Holy Week and the crucifixion that the glory of God will be displayed in the person of Jesus there too. John records in the words of Jesus in chapter 13, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once." It's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it, if you think about it? But essentially, what it means is that even if the world views the crucifixion as humiliation, disgrace, a curse, a failure even, Jesus himself knew that in looking at the cross, his mission would be complete and accomplished. And Jesus repeats it not once, not twice, but 5 times in those 2 verses. Glorified, 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 glorify, glorify. And the secret to attaining glory comes through the sacrifice that Jesus makes. It is to give oneself up, to lose oneself, which is at the heart, isn't it, of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. All the grace and truth that was given in the John 1 reading is made real, is made visible on the cross. The glory is ultimately found in sacrificial love. The story of the wedding at Cana reveals the divine glory that radiates from Jesus as his public ministry begins. A glory that is both loving and life-giving. A glory that is physical, as something that can be touched and felt. That's the marker of this first sign at the beginning of John's Gospel. I wonder if you've ever come across the phrase or heard someone talk about the thin places of earth. The thin places of earth. They could be remembering something of a spiritual encounter that touched their heart and their lives and that sustained them in their faith, and they might mention a particular place that they have visited where that encounter happened. And that is known as a thin place. Places such as the island of Iona in Scotland or Lourdes in France. Those are known as thin places. And the phrase has been used for centuries and finds its roots in the Celtic spirituality and Celtic Christians who were deeply connected to the natural world and saw the divine presence in everyday life. We might even say in the wedding celebrations of a young couple in the village of Cana where the wine had run out from their party. Thin places are where the veil between the sacred and divine and the ordinary is very thin. And the glory of God, the presence of God, can be seen and can be experienced. Thin places and holy spaces are where encounters with God are most real, where heaven touches earth and God's presence is felt. I wonder if you've ever experienced a thin place in your journey of faith. Can you recount an experience of the presence of the divine in a tangible and life-changing fashion. Because that's what this sign in John's Gospel points to. And we can see the results of this encounter as we read that Jesus' disciples put their faith in him. The signs of John's Gospel, indeed the miracles in the Gospels that Jesus performs, yes, bring health, bring healing, bring wholeness, and in the case here, saves the blushes of this young couple starting out in life. But signs and miracles only ever point to the one who is behind them, namely the presence of God, the God of creation. In revealing his glory in this rather domestic mix-up at a wedding feast, Jesus draws back the curtain, if you like, to show us his true identity, that he is the Son of God and the one who has come to bring life and life in abundance, the one who will bring healing and restoration, the one who will bring new life out of old and joy and celebration to all who hear and respond to the Spirit's call on their lives. Perhaps you may have prayed, Lord, show me your glory that I may believe. Echoing the words from our Old Testament reading and Moses asking God, show me your glory. And in response, the Lord caused all of his goodness to pass before Moses. And Moses had that great sense of wanting to know the Lord and his mercy, the Lord granting him sight. We might say new sight that would sustain him and carry him through the ministry that the Lord had given to him. Very often in the Old Testament, the presence of the Lord, the glory of the Lord, was given for a specific time and a specific moment to a specific person to give them encouragement for the tasks that God had given to them. But with the advent of Jesus, the presence and the glory of God are given to all who believe and follow and trust in the Lord. If you think about it, thinking about the Old Testament reading, God said that Moses couldn't see his face, because if he saw his face, if he saw the divine glory in all its fullness, he would die. But now in the New Testament, we can see Jesus face to face, who is the divine presence of the God of creation. Jesus indeed prays for all believers. The prayer in John 17, where he prays that he would be glorified, that he prays for his disciples, and then he prays for all of us, all believers, saying, Father, I want those you have given me to be where I am, and to see my glory, the glory you have given me, because you loved me before the creation of the world. The biblical scholar Don Carson says in his commentary on John's Gospel, glory commonly refers to the manifestation of God's character or person in a revelatory context. In other words, we see through the person of Jesus Christ the glory of God. The God who we can see in our Gospel reading today, the God who is the one who gives, and gives in abundance, who gives to overflowing the best and the choicest, not just of wine, but in life. That is who God is, and that is what God does for you and for me. The Apostle Paul, writing to the believers in Corinth in his second letter, says, for what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. The truth is that when we come face to face with Jesus, then we see God. And our lives can never, ever be the same again. For it's then that we are in the presence of the Almighty, the one who desires that we turn to him and put our trust and our faith in him and commit our lives to follow his will and not our own desires and ways. Jesus' disciples put their faith in him because they saw something that caught their attention, that captured their imagination and swept them along on the adventure of following Jesus. They were witness to the very presence of God revealed in Jesus Christ through his glory. What an amazing moment. As we close, I pray that we too would see and know the presence of God in our lives, and that there we would see and know the incredible change, the transformation that is only found in a life with Christ, to the glory and praise of God.